Now, we've seen GARP and how it's moving our profession forward, and you've seen some of the tools that we're providing to help your organizations get where they need to be. The next step is making sure that you have a seat at the table, taking part in those conversations that are critical to getting information governance right. And here to help us make that transition is Galina Datskovsky, your president of ARMA International. Galina Datskovsky, CRM, Ph.D.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.
От имени директоров организации добро пожаловать на 56-ю конференцию. There you go, Nick. There are perhaps only a few of you in the audience. How many of you understood what I just said? Maybe none. Okay. Okay, let me try that in English. On behalf of the board of directors, let me welcome you to the 56th annual conference of ARMA International. And the reason that I start my time on stage this way is not to show off my linguistic skills. Of course, they're wonderful, but, but to illustrate a point. To truly understand each other, we must have a common language. The same is true in our organizations. When we don't have a common language with our IT departments, our legal departments, or our C-level suite, we miss out. Even though we may all speak English in this room, and in general, as a common language, the meaning of the words may be totally different. We don't understand, and we don't have the full picture. Creating a common language is an active process. So many times we hear the sounds that are made, we hear the words being formed, and believe magically that we'll just start to understand. But that kind of magical thinking, unless you're in Harry Potter, doesn't really work. Learning is an active process. We must take the first step and learn the language of our counterparts, and to create a common way of communication. If we are not an active seeker of education, there's a very real danger that the conversation will pass us by. I'd like to tell you a little story of an old man who lives in a flood zone. And of course, some of us in Washington and New York have lived through a few floods, so we could probably relate to this. A hurricane hits the area, and the government suggests a total evacuation. Now, he, of course, refuses, as many old men would. He sits on the front steps of his house in a now empty, evacuated neighborhood, while a police car drives by and offers him a ride. He says, "That's all right. God will take care of me. I don't need the ride." And they go away. Now he's sitting on a small balcony on the second story of his house. The first floor of his house is totally flooded. And a boat comes by. Police again offers him a ride. He says, let us take you out. He says, "That's all right. God will take care of me." Okay, they go away, and a few hours later, there he is sitting on the roof of his house, and the entire house is now submerged. A rescue helicopter comes by and offers him a ride. And he says, "That's all right. God will take care of me." Of course, they go away, and naturally, he drowns. Well, he comes before God and says, "Listen, I'm terribly disappointed in you. I believed in you, truly." Oh, what happened to the lights? I believed in you. And there we go. And you let me down. And God says, "Listen, I sent you a car, a boat, and a helicopter. All you had to do was take the first step. So you've taken a good first step today. You're here to learn. You have the opportunity to learn the language you need to keep your organizations moving forward. You are an expert within your organization. But do your colleagues truly know that? Do they realize the resources and the perspective that you bring to the table?" Often the answer is no. And the reason too often falls into one of two categories. First is the lack of a common language. with our counterparts and the C-suite. And the second, that you may not be actively taking a role in letting your organizations know the critical skills that you actually bring to the table. You have to find a common language. You have to assert yourself, making yourself relevant to those conversations. Like the old man in my story, you need to take the steps necessary to ensure success. Today, we want to give you concrete steps to follow as you become comfortable talking to the C-suite and to a certain extent to your IT counterparts. We can lump these two audiences together because your approach to these conversations will be very similar. It's our duty as a professional association to educate both you as the professional and the organizations you work for. In order to succeed in ARMA International's mission, we must both give you the tools you need and to convince your organizations to embrace good information governance. Let me take a poll. By show of hands, how many of you would say you have a seat at the C-level table? Okay, quite a few. Great. Now the lights would have been helpful, but that's okay. So let me tell you about a title I saw on a business card recently. I was very impressed by this title. It said, Chief Records Officer. Let me let that sink in for 1 minute. Chief Records Officer. Now, all of us in this room may not have that as our ultimate career goal, but it certainly shows a certain level of upward mobility that implies value to the organization. You know that your organization values you when they seek your input. Your organization shows they value you when they trust your judgment. They usually won't take the first step for you and ask you unprovoked. You have to make that happen yourself, at least the first time around. It takes hard work, but when your organization values what you provide, that's when promotions happen. If your employer sees value in what you bring to the table, you continue to be relevant. Sometimes that means that your employer is happy to pay your dues for you or send you to a conference. And sometimes the battle is more difficult. You have to take more of a responsibility on yourself. You have to make the investment in yourself to make sure your employer sees you as relevant. Let's talk for a moment about how your organization can see you as that relevant professional. For those of us who have been complacent in our jobs, reluctant to take much responsibility, our career prospects are limited. To be relevant to your organization, you must insert yourself into your work situation. You must make it clear to your organization why it needs information governance, and that you are the information governance professional it needs. So how do we do that? Well, first we must understand that the problems of business have changed. There's a world of chaos that is organizational information. From the GARP assessment video, you saw that approximately 7 to 9% of enterprise content can be considered official records. So is that all you manage? Is that all you really care about? Then you can only hope to be 7 to 9% relevant. What about the other 91% of information? It lives and grows exponentially in servers. It walks out the door on portable devices. It lives in the cloud. It's being duplicated on hard drives and in SharePoint sites. And it really all must be governed. So you have to help your organizations solve its pressing pain points. Show how you can help them become more efficient while minimizing risk. And oh, by the way, I think we saw a great example of that with our Cobalt Award winners. When it comes to retention and disposition, let's talk a concrete example, retention and disposition. When it comes to that, do you strive for perfection? If you do, the process may never happen. Striving for perfection costs us time and may leave us paralyzed to act. As they say, perfection is the enemy of the good. Instead, let's discuss retention and disposition differently. Our focus should be on legally defensible retention and disposition. Legally defensible means that we are dealing with our risk and reasonableness and showing a good faith effort. It's not just for legal reasons that we make this transition. it's also business efficiency. You can't just scare people into listening to you with examples of spoliation cases and major regulatory or court-sanctioned fines. Fear alone is not a sufficient argument or motivation. The argument must also be made that legally defensible retention and disposition makes our businesses more efficient. I guess I love the lights. At the same time, we eliminate the information we don't need, leaving us more efficient in our next search, our next legal hold, or our next data integration or new software rollout. When changes make good business sense and reduce risk, organizations start to listen. Let's take another poll. Who here fights with their IT departments? Okay. Again, it comes back to speaking the same language and making your case in a way they can clearly and easily understand. You must work together. It's really not a case of you versus them. It's about everyone as a team. The culture you need to create should be all about one company, one organization, and common goals. The genesis of the battle we shouldn't be having is easy to see. When the world started to become electronic, businesses asked for help from the IT departments. Electronically stored information, things like email, SharePoint, share drives, and so forth, has traditionally been the exclusive purview of IT, not because they are the governance experts, but because the language they speak is the one that allows the businesses to implement and maintain IT needs. And of course, we all know what happens when many of us do not insert ourselves as being relevant to that conversation. Rollouts without good policy behind them result in difficulties down the road. SharePoint signs become unwieldy and orphaned. Our organizations spend money on storage for ridiculous emails, such as asking their coworkers to lunch, and pictures and other ridiculous things. You can't wait to be invited to these discussions. Complaining after the fact that the right people were not consulted may feel good, but it doesn't help your organization move forward. Just as in the story of the old man. Again, you must demonstrate your relevance and be ready to speak the right language. We've been talking about the difficult part of getting a seat at the table, namely stepping up and making ourselves relevant. So my advice to you here is just do it. One of my many women mentors has always told me that one of the keys to success is shameless self-promotion, something women and apparently information governance professionals are not all that great at. The second part is much easier, learning the language. You must be familiar with legal and IT terms. The more you know, the more relevant you become to the conversation. So what resources can you use? Well, ARMA International is a spectacular source to learn, and you can do these things today. Learning the language of information governance, the language that is relevant to the C-suite, and legal and IT alike is to learn GARP. GARP presents the value of information governance. It encapsulates its importance in business terms, and it provides a maturity model we can use to show our organizations how much further they need to go. During this conference, you'll be able to attend many sessions on GARP, and they are listed in your schedule, but we'll put a few of them on the screen for you. In this conference, you will find 10 sessions on GARP. That's 10% of our sessions, with one other session at the MER experience at the conference. And some of the highlights are the GARP Watch, your GARP Starter Kit, GARP and Privacy, GARP in Government, applying GARP to SharePoint, GARP and Information Governance, improving RIM performance using GARP and ARM, that's at the MER experience, using GARP to assess your organization's information governance, GARP Principle of Accountability, GARP, how do we turn blue to green, using GARP as a framework for software development. If you are signed up for the MER experience sessions, you'll be right on target for your information governance challenges. If you didn't get a chance to go, and if your executives aren't going, these sessions are available to purchase on the ARMA International website. So be sure to share. Attend these sessions to learn the language of GARP, and then feel confident in the language you use to bring that to your organization to make yourself relevant. Unfortunately, you don't have to pack all of your GARP experiences into 1 week. There are amazing resources for you online. There are free web seminars that walk through each GARP principle. And I encourage you to get further and really expand your understanding to cover the perspective of your peers in the legal world. There's a tremendous white paper on the website written by the Honorable Ron Hedges about how working with the information governance maturity model can provide guidance in investigations and litigation. Go further than that with that knowledge and take the online course, GARP and the Legally Defensible Information Governance, to understand how the e-discovery reference model isn't just a step in the e-discovery process, but an ongoing process that can be managed by best practices like GARP. It includes valuable examples of case law and how the GARP principles could have protected organizations from being the negative examples they have become. And if you still have more questions, then just ask. In my column this year, InfoPro Online, I'm covering various kinds of tips. Be sure to read those and feel free to make suggestions. I'll be happy to address them in my column. Also, use the Essential of RIM certificate program. Share this program with your IT counterparts to make everyone in your organization an ally in the cause. Remember, it's not us versus them, it's about the organization. And of course, there are other sessions you'll be attending at this conference. Nearly every session is being recorded. They're perfect for taking back to your counterparts. If you're a full paid conference attendee, you'll have access to these sessions for a full year next year. So plan a lunch and learn with your collaborative team from IT, legal, and so forth. Invite them to watch the key sessions that deal with the problems that are facing you right now. It's a great step toward proving your relevance to your organization. It's a great step towards speaking the same language as your C-level and your collaborative team. ARMA International is bringing you value as a member through these sessions and other resources at your disposal. And in turn, you are bringing value to your organization by taking an active role in using them. And when you do that, everybody wins. Thank you and have a great conference.